Every year on the anniversary of the brutal murders, a mist rises from one cemetery and travels to another. Locals say it's the ghost of Eunice Crouch searching for her father. I'm Beth Anne Campbell, and this is Something Weird Happened Here. Welcome to Something Weird Happened Here, the podcast for people who love a twisted tale but aren't afraid to poke at it a bit. We share stories that are postmarked peculiar and then explore the story with curiosity and an open mind. Stay tuned after the show to find out how to submit your strange saga, and maybe we or you will share it on air. Now let's get started, because no matter where you are in this mysterious world, something weird happened here. This tale is postmarked Jackson County, Michigan. Subject line, The Crouch Murders. So today I'm going to be sharing a paranormal tale that is just perfect for the theme of this podcast, which is weird, unexplainable things with a smidge of reality. So this tale is part true crime, part paranormal, and part realistic ghost hunt. This event took place just a few miles from where I grew up in Jackson County, Michigan. And if you're watching on video, I'm pointing to the bottom center of my palm because Michigan is shaped like a mitten. So we Michiganders like to show people where we live by pointing to our hand. For this tale, we're going to go back to the night of November 21st, 1883, during a raging thunderstorm, which not super common in Michigan in November, except one other famous thunderstorm, which was the thunderstorm that wrecked the Edmund Fitzgeralds. I guess it's not as uncommon as I think. Anyway, it's November 21st, 1883. A wealthy farmer, 74-year-old Jacob Crouch, his pregnant daughter Eunice White, her husband Henry, and a visiting cattle buyer from, I think, Pennsylvania named Moses Poley, they were all shot to death inside the Crouch home in Spring Arbor Township, Michigan. Now, Jacob Crouch was originally from New York State, but he settled in Lower Michigan in 1830 or so. He was allegedly a millionaire when he died, which would have been pretty rich for the 1800s, late 1800s. He was also kind of a dick, my word, not anything that anybody else said, just my interpretation. A bit of a curmudgeon, as they say, maybe a little bit of a tightwad with his wealth. I'll say that's probably pretty accurate. So Jacob had 5 children with his wife Anna. His youngest child, Judd, not to be confused with Judd Nelson from the best movie of all time, The Breakfast Club. Judd was raised by his older sister, Susan, who is one of Jacob's older children, because the mom, Anna, died just about a week after giving birth to Judd. So he was the 5th, and he was raised by his sister. Eunice was another one of Jacob's children, and some say that she was most definitely his favorite. So she and her husband Henry were living at the Crouch home at the time of the murders because I guess old Jacob was, getting up there in years, and sometimes we have to take care of our parents when they get old. So Jacob had Judd, the youngest, Eunice, his favorite, and then Susan, who was raising Judd. He also had 2 other kids, Dayton and Byron. They moved to Texas. Dayton died mysteriously in 1882, just about a year before the murders, which has absolutely no bearing on this tale. Or does it? I don't know. There's a lot of unusual deaths in this tale. Anyway, on the night of the murder, the 4 people mentioned, Jacob, Eunice, Henry, and then the cattle guy, Moses Poley, were inside the house. There were also 2 other people in the house, a farmhand named George Bowles, and then a servant named Julia Reese. George was the farmhand. He was about 16 years old, and he said he woke up in the middle of the night from the thunder, and he thought he saw somebody standing outside with a lantern, and he heard some other noises, some ruckus. He got a little scared, so he hid in a trunk, and he didn't come out until morning. When he went downstairs the next morning, he was the one who found the bodies and ended up going to get the sheriff. So Jacob was in bed with a gunshot wound in the back of his neck, so he's the father, the patriarch. Henry and Eunice White were in another bedroom on the bed. Henry had a bullet hole under his right ear and another one in his skull. Eunice had 2 bullet holes in her right arm, one in the neck and one in her head. She was also like 8 or 9 months pregnant, so technically it's really 5 people killed. The cattle buyer, Moses Poley, was in another bedroom, and he had a bullet hole in his neck that went into his brain. And by the way, There's a copy of the original news release, almost like a photocopy of it from the day after the murders, and it's out on the internet. You can go look at it. It has a shocking amount of detail about the murders. Like today, all that stuff is kept private, but back in the olden days, apparently it was okay to have R-rated descriptions of brutal murders in the local paper because there's a lot of detail. So the other person who was in the house, the servant Julia, said she didn't hear anything. The original sheriff report said there was a strong smell of chloroform in the house and then tracks around one corner of the house. Now, Jacob was known to keep money in his house and he didn't trust banks. Also, this cattle drover guy, Moses Poley, apparently he liked to get his drink on and brag about his own money. So that was one theory of why they were murdered for money. The two servants, George and Julia, were jailed, but they were eventually released because there was no evidence. At least two people related to the family died under mysterious circumstances within a couple months of the murders, including Jacob's other daughter, Susan, and then one of his farmhands. So, Susan, if you remember, she was the one raising her brother, her younger brother, Judd, as her own. Susan was found dead in her bed on January 2nd, 1884, so just a little over a month after the murders. That was inconclusive. Some people said she was poisoned. Maybe it was a heart thing. There were a lot of theories. Suicide. The farmhand was found shot in the head on January 4th, and that was ruled a suicide. The main suspects for the murders included Jacob's own son, Judd, the youngest, that was being raised by Susan, the other daughter, and Jacob's son-in-law, Daniel Holcomb. And he was the one married to Susan, also raising Judd. Susan, the one who died under mysterious circumstances. It was rumored that Jacob Crouch intended to leave his entire estate to Eunice, his favorite, and maybe that was motivation for Judd and Daniel to commit the murders. So Daniel, who remember was raising his wife's brother as his own, Judd, Daniel did go to trial, but he was found not guilty. And most of the evidence that was presented was apparently reported to be very circumstantial. So he was found not guilty. Judd, the youngest of Jacob's sons, being raised by his sister, never went to trial. The Crouch murders were never solved, and to this day, nobody has ever been convicted of the crimes. So that's the true crime part of this story. Now let's talk about the paranormal. So Jacob and Eunice, so the father and his favorite daughter, are buried in separate cemeteries, both in Jackson County, Michigan. And the locals claim that every year on the night of November 21st, a mist rises from Eunice's headstone in one cemetery and travels 5 miles to the burial site of Jacob. And many believe that this mist is the spirit of Eunice reuniting with her father on the anniversary of their gruesome deaths. A lot of people have gathered over the years, far and wide, on this anniversary to try and see the mist. So it's a big local legend. I mean, I had heard about it when I was growing up. I think now the locals, like the law enforcement and the neighbors in the area, have kind of cracked down, so it doesn't get quite the crowds that it used to do. So, but that is the paranormal story around the Crouch murders. All right, so that's the paranormal. Here's where the Crouch murders becomes a personal tale for me. When I was a paranormal investigator, I had two opportunities to walk the Crouch property, including one where I was in the house that was built on top of the original Crouch home. So when I was still living and working in Michigan and also actively ghost hunting, I used to talk about my paranormal investigations a lot with my coworkers. And people are really interested. It was a fairly new thing at the time. The ghost hunting TV shows and movies were like super popular and people were really interested. So I talked about it a lot. I mean, and I'm a talker, so sue me. Anyway, in one of those conversations, my boss at the time revealed that he owned the property bordering the site of the Crouch murders. In fact, I think his grandparents had even lived there or owned that property at one point. Anyway, he gave my husband and I permission to walk his land around the Crouch property, and lo and behold, universe moment, while we were doing that, we met the new owners of the property. Lovely couple. They just happened to be sitting out in their yard, kind of near the property line when my husband and I were kind of walking on my boss's land. So we got to talking, and they told us that they were planning on renovating the house that was sitting on the property. Now, that house, that it was pretty old, it was very run down, but it was not the original Crouch house where the murders took place. I think the original house burned down like back in the 1940s, something like that. So we exchanged information. We told them we were ghost hunters, and eventually we got permission from this couple to investigate on the property. So they hadn't renovated, they hadn't moved in yet, so it was basically unoccupied. So my husband Sean and I, along with my niece, went out one night and we just did sort of a mini hunt. We didn't really find much, and we didn't even go into the house because the owners weren't present. And like I said, it was pretty run down. It was pretty in very bad shape. But not long after that, less than a year, maybe it was a few months, I just don't remember, we got invited to a full investigation by a ghost hunter acquaintance of ours. So we were acquainted with this guy, and he'd heard about our connection with the property. Again, Crouch Murder is very famous for the state. Anybody who did any kind of ghost hunting in the state was familiar. So he had heard that we had a connection. He reached out to see if we could connect him with the owners, which I did, but I think he ended up making contact himself, neither here nor there. But because my husband and I had been helpful and we kind of spurred the interest, he invited us to this investigation with another group out of Michigan, which was scheduled for November 21st, the anniversary of the Crouch murders. Now, here's where we're going to pivot a little bit from, ooh, this scary ghost story into the reality of ghost hunting. So I showed up to the investigation. It was just me. My husband stayed home. And I was just planning on scoping around a little bit. I wanted to be a part of this. Who wouldn't? But I hadn't planned on staying for the whole night. I mean, I had already been out there once before. So I was going to look around, help out with the investigation for a bit, and then I was just going to let them do their thing. And honestly, it really wasn't the best conditions for an investigation anyway. First of all, they had a large generator that was running very close to the house for some of their equipment, and it was loud. The owners were there and some of their friends. I can't remember if the wife was there, but the husband was there and with some friends, and they were sitting down at the edge of the property, maybe 100 feet from the house, around a bonfire, and they were chatting. There were probably 20 people total with the investigation team and the owner and their friends. But I mean, it's the most famous murder site in the county, maybe even the state. So sometimes you just go for the experience. So the investigation was just getting started when the husband owner asked if any of us wanted to tour the house. And there were three or four of us in the area. And of course, we said, fuck yes. I mean, even though this wasn't the actual house where the murders took place, it was right on top of the original site. So I and a small handful of other people from the investigation team went inside with the owner, and no surprise, it was very much in need of some serious work, like borderline condemned. It was a little iffy. But we went upstairs, we took some photos, we did a short EVP session, which means we just asked some questions to any spirits that might be around. And all the while, the owner is, talking about the house, like how he's going to fix it up and that kind of thing. And it was just a great little tour. We got some photos, we got a bit of video, and about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes later, we were back outside and on our way. So I thanked the owner, got ready to leave. It was still early, but like I said, I hadn't planned on staying for the entire time. As I'm leaving, I go over to a car that's running in the driveway. And the lead of this investigation team, I'm just going to call her Rita because I don't remember her name, but let's call her Rita. Rita was sitting in the driver's seat with the window open. Now, Rita was a little different, like not the type of person who runs up to you and gives you a big hug. Let's just say that. I don't give a shit. She's just another person to me. I was grateful to have the opportunity to be a part of the investigation and to get inside the house on the actual site, the building foundation of where the murders took place. So I stopped by the car. I thanked her for letting me come along, and I just let her know that I was leaving. And old Rita, she lit into me. She reamed me a new one. She was furious. She told me I ruined the investigation with the talking that we did. We did when we were inside the house. I apparently singularly ruined the investigation, even though there were three or four other people inside the house, including the owner and some of Rita's own team members. So I was pretty taken aback. I mean, given all the other ambient noise, it wasn't like our little house tour had been the only thing standing between Rita and a pristine EVP response from the ghost of Jacob Crouch. Plus, we were only in there for a short while, and they investigated for hours after I left. So I basically told Rita I was sorry that she felt that way. There was no harm intended, but she doubled down and she told me again that I ruined it. It was very awkward, and I'm generally just not a confrontational person. So anyway, I left the show, and then later, like maybe a few days, the guy who had originally reached out to us for a contact apologized for her behavior, and he said something to the effect of, "That's just how she is." My opinion, world according to Beth, I think Rita was a little introverted and she was mad that she didn't get asked to go inside. Now, she was right there in the area when the owner offered. She could have stepped up. She could have asked the owner for another tour, but she didn't. So that's just my theory. I could be wrong. In case you're wondering, no, I did not get anything on audio or video or photos during my maybe 45 minutes on the whole site total on the anniversary of the murders, other than a scolding from Rita, the insecure ghost hunter. And that, my friends, is the reality of paranormal investigation. It's just like real life. People don't get along. They don't agree on how things are done. Sometimes they cooperate and get scolded for no reason. And this is why I wanted to do this podcast, not as just another scary story podcast, but to ask questions and to be realistic about unexplained events. And this is why I write about paranormal investigation realistically in my book, The RIP Files, Case of the Demon Drums. This is the first in a series that I'm writing inspired by real paranormal investigation cases that I worked when I was a ghost hunter for nearly a decade. Yes, investigations are scary, especially for the people who are dealing with something unknown, but they're also fun and frustrating and hard work and eye-opening, and emotions can run wild. So there you have it, the story of the Crouch murders and a little slice of reality ghost hunting thrown in. The Crouch murders tale is actually featured in a great book, Haunted Travels of Michigan, Volume 2, History, Mystery, and Haunting by Kathleen Tedson and Beverly Rydell. So check it out, and also Volume 1 for some more great Michigan ghost stories. You can go to bethannecampbell.com/thebookshelf for a link to purchase. I'd love to hear from other paranormal investigators about their experiences, so stay tuned, listen to the credits to find out how you can get in contact with us to submit your story and maybe be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and stay skeptical, but don't run towards the gunshots you hear on a dark, stormy night in the palm of Michigan. Thanks for joining this episode of Something Weird Happened Here. If you have a twisted tale that you witnessed, experienced, or heard from a reliable source, go to bethannecampbell.com/somethingweird to learn more and submit your story. If your tale is twisted enough, we'll share it on air during one of our episodes and might even invite you to be a guest on the show. And we're not picky. Your Something Weird Happened Here could be paranormal, psychic, UFOs, near-death experiences, dreams, parallel dimensions, Bigfoot, Chupacabra, or any other weird and unexplained phenomena. We don't discriminate. If you're into paranormal mysteries that are scary, fun, and realistic, pick up a copy of my latest book, The RIP Files, Case of the Demon Drums, the first in a series inspired by real cases that I, Beth Anne Campbell, worked on when I was a ghost hunter for nearly a decade. Case of the Demon Drums is available on Amazon and most online bookstores. And finally, we would so appreciate it if you would rate and review us on your favorite streaming platform and/or on YouTube. Thanks again, and remember, stay skeptical, but don't run towards the noise.